Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome back to another installment of A Date with Darkness podcast. I'm super excited to chat with you on today's show. Sorry, my voice is a little raspy. It's I don't know, it's that feeling that you get when you have like a little frog in your throat. Well, that's kind of what I've been experiencing, a little frog in my throat that's just here for the stay today. So that's what you're gonna get, I guess. But I'm so excited to have you back. So excited to chat with you. We have another great show planned for you guys today. Want to check in, see how you guys are doing, make sure that you are taking care of yourself and that you are, embracing yourselves in every step of your healing journey. So healing is an evolutionary process. It's a messy process. Sometimes, some days are better than others, and sometimes you feel like you're getting ahead. Other times you might feel like you're taking 10 steps backwards. But if you are here and you are determined and you're motivated, then you are doing the work, and that is progress. So thank you for being here with me today. So of course, we like to do all the administrative stuff in the beginning. So of course, as you know, we have the Facebook group, A Date with Darkness group. If you are looking for support on your healing journey, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about the podcast, email me at admin@drnataliejones.com, and I will definitely put that in the show notes. If you are looking to get on the newsletter, I haven't sent out in a few weeks just because I've been busy with other projects, but the plan is to get back on track starting this week, and it normally comes out first thing every Friday morning. So you can visit drnataliejones.com, and right now we have the free ebook of red flags in your relationship that is downloadable. It has a checklist, and you could see how many of those show up for you, and kind of get a sense of what to do about it. And of course, we have the group and individual membership coaching opening up. And so the plan is we are still diligently working behind the scenes on the website and the content for you. So that is coming up. And so now let's move on ahead with today's episode. In today's episode, I have Debi Silber on. We're going to talk about today. We're going to take a deeper dive into betrayal trauma and what that looks like and how that affects you on such a deep level. If you've ever been betrayed, you know that it can knock you off of your feet for a little while, and so it can definitely take its toll on you emotionally. It can take its toll on you physically, just socially, and even financially, and in a number of ways. And not a lot of people understand that, or can understand what it's like to be in your shoes unless they've actually gone through the journey. So Debi and I, we have a candid conversation about that, and she really just breaks it down so eloquently, as well as she shares her story in betrayal, and how she overcame that and how that led to greater things, and why healing after betrayal It's not so much so for the other person, but it's about you and you taking care of yourself as well. So, without further ado, here's Debbie. Hello and welcome to the show, Dr. Debbie.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. I'm excited to have you on. And so, for the listeners who may not know who you are, what you do, can you tell us about who you are, what you do, and the passion behind your work?
Sure. I'm the founder and CEO of the PBT, which stands for Post Betrayal Transformation Institute. You can imagine no one studies betrayal unless you have to, and I'm no different. It's my 30th year in business. And as life would change, so would business. So I started in health and then mindset and then personal development. And then I had a really painful betrayal from my family. Thought I did everything I needed to do to heal from that. And then it happened a few years later. This time it was my husband. So I got him out of the house because that was the deal breaker, and looked at the two experiences thinking, well, what's similar to these two of me, but what else? And I realized, I boundaries were always getting crossed. I never took my needs seriously. And I'm one of those believers, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, a thriving business. And I said, I'm going back for a PhD. And it was in transpersonal psychology, the psychology of transformation and human potential, because I was changing so much. I didn't quite understand what was happening. He was too, wasn't ready to look at that. And then it was time to do a study. So I studied betrayal. What holds us back? What helps us heal? And what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive? That study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my work, my family, my life.
Mm. You know, it's so interesting listening to you talk. I feel like I can talk to you all day now. Because it's like, okay. And it's so amazing. I love you being so candid and sharing that. Can you talk a little bit for people out there that are listening to you? And, because I feel like there's words out there that you use. They're very small, but they have very big meanings,
Mhm.
right? So respect, love, and betrayal, I feel like is another one. So for people who are listening to you, can you break down what is betrayal? Like what is that and what that looks like?
Yes. And betrayal is one of those words, you feel it. It's like
Yes.
a gut punch.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah. So,
yeah.
and I define betrayal as the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule. And every relationship has them.
Mm.
The way it works is the more you trust and depend on someone, the bigger the betrayal. So let's take a child who's totally and completely dependent on their parent, and the parent does something awful. That's going to have a different impact than, let's say, your best friend sharing your secret. Both are betrayals, different level of cleanup left in the wake. But betrayal has so many faces. I mean, it could be, siblings saying, we'll take care of mom and dad one day. And then that day comes, where are they? It could be your coworker taking credit for your idea. It could be infidelity. It could be financial. 2 partners at work, and all of a sudden, they're building this business together. Where's the money? You could feel betrayed. Let's say you're religious. You could feel betrayed by God. The rule could be, I worship, you're going to keep me safe. And something happens, you could feel a betrayal there. Self-betrayal. We swear, well, I'm not going to go to that thing or that person, and we keep going back, right? So it has so many faces.
So I'm sure that there's somebody who's listening to you and they're saying, it's really in the eye of the beholder. It's very subjective.
It depends on the rules of that relationship.
Okay.
That's what it is. And there are those spoken and unspoken rules. Every relationship has a different set of rules, though.
Mm.
So it's really based on each relationship. What were the rules? What were those spoken or unspoken rules? Because the way it works is, without our awareness or consent,
Mm.
someone broke those rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's the betrayal.
Mm. Thank you for breaking that down. I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit on the unspoken rules. What is that? What does that look like?
Yeah. For example, maybe you never spoke out loud about, hey, you can't have an affair. That's not part of it. It's just understood.
Hmm.
You
Okay.
see? And just in the time you've been with that person, that became the rule.
Mm.
And it was never, maybe you assumed it didn't even have to be spoken. Isn't it the most obvious thing in the world? Right. So there are, like here, think about it. We were meeting today. We had a scheduled appointment.
Yes.
Now, if I didn't show up, I would have betrayed you. Now, it wouldn't have, you may have gotten upset, but that wouldn't have broken you. We're never broken, bent. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's a different, right? It was unspoken.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't like we verbally said, okay, we're confirmed and I'll be here. Right. It was unspoken.
Very true. But at least there's like some sort of notification there versus unspoken. It's like, and this could be a slippery slope for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Because I could see it turning into a whole bunch of nuances. But I want to kind of backtrack about something you were sharing, candidly. You were talking about family betrayal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people out there that listen to this and they have that. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is and kind of what that looks like? Because, family is, again, it's one of those relationships, right? They create the buttons, boundaries can be blurred because it's family, we're blood, all those kind of those sayings and those nuances. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and what that looks like?
Sure. And that's why it hurts the most. It hurts so much. Even when I was doing the study, and I would love to get to the discoveries,
Okay.
when I was doing the study, originally I was studying the betrayal of a family member, partner, or friend. And I actually had to drop the friend part because while friends will infuriate you if they betray you, they don't bring you to your knees and crush you like the betrayal of a family member or a partner.
You don't
Well,
think so?
they absolutely can infuriate you. You will be furious. But if you've experienced the betrayal of a friend compared to the betrayal of a romantic partner or a family member, it's a different experience. There's still lots of cleanup, but the level of physical, mental, and emotional symptoms left in the wake of each is a bit different. And I'm happy to get to
Okay,
that.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
gonna have to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not suggesting at all that friendship betrayals. Now, here's the thing: if a friend, but here's the difference.
Yeah.
Let's say you have a partner, a romantic partner, and your friend is the one that partner is romantic with. That's a different story. I'm not talking about that.
For sure. There's levels to that. Oh, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. I'm talking about the friend who shared your secret, just a different thing compared to the partner or the family. Anyway, but think about it. When the person you trusted the most, the people you trusted the most proves untrustworthy, who do you trust? When the one or the ones you run to when other people are causing harm, when those are the ones causing the harm, where do you go? So there is such a shattering of our very foundation and level of safety and security. And it starts with our family. So if it's been shattered there, it is so likely that unless we clean that up, we move into relationships, not that they're good, they're just so familiar.
Yeah.
We know that pain. We know what it feels like, so really common. But family betrayals, they're awful. I mean, there's no betrayal that's good, but they're painful for sure.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, I had a guest on and we were talking about emotional incest, and it comes up again for me as I'm talking to you about betrayal. Is like the interesting thing about family is that, betrayal can be going on for years and you're not even aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that because if you don't know any differently, you assume. That's why it's so painful. You assume that these people have your back, or doing right by you,
And
are
you look the
supporting
other
you.
way. Yeah. And you might look the other way or do a lot of overcompensating, I would
Of
imagine,
course, of course.
to say, this isn't happening.
Mhm.
They
Yeah,
love me.
yeah. Betrayal blindness. I mean, that's a real thing. It's
Mm.
when your safety is at risk, right? We overlook because it is safer and in my best interest for me to tolerate this level of abuse
Mm.
than call them on this stuff because, like, think about it. If you're a little kid, you risk everything. So it's a lot to overcome, a lot to maneuver through, but you
Can you,
can.
yeah, can you talk to me about the betrayal blindness a little
Yeah.
bit more and how that works and perhaps how it goes from blindness to actually seeing it? Because
Yeah.
that's always been a very interesting phenomenon to me too.
Yeah, yeah. And like I shared, especially when your safety is
Mm-hmm.
at stake right here, there,
Mm-hmm.
it's in out, we think it's in our best interest to overlook, right? Because think
Mm-hmm.
about it, if I won't get fed, if I won't have a place to live, if I won't have what we perceive as security, I'll take this because that's more important.
What
So
if
we
it's not even to that level? Like, what if it's just people being a jerk or people infidelity
Yeah,
maybe, and you're not
sure.
necessarily dependent on your spouse, but you're just kind of in a relationship? So what if
Yeah.
it's not necessarily
Well,
physically safety? Sorry.
yeah, sure. Yeah, no, no, absolutely. So actually, there were three groups in my study who didn't heal.
Okay.
One of them, this was, and that's why, and when I get into the discoveries,
Okay.
it'll
Yeah,
explain a little bit more.
let's move into it
But
then. If that
oh, sure.
helps you, yeah, let's move into it.
Okay. Then I'll hold off on the groups that didn't heal. I'll save that for after. Anyway, the first discovery was, originally I was studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth. And for those who aren't familiar, that's sort of, I look at it as the kind of upside of trauma, how that trauma,
Mm,
regardless, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, whatever, leaves you with a new awareness, insight, perspective that you didn't have before. But I had been through death of a loved one, I'd been through disease. And I was like, no, betrayal feels different for me. But I didn't want to assume it was the same for all my study participants. So I asked them, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, does it feel different for you? Hands down, unanimously. They said, oh my gosh, it's so different. Here's why. Because it feels so intentional, we take it
mm,
so personally. So
mm,
the entire self is shattered and has to be rebuilt. Think about it: rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust. When you lose someone you love, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss. You don't necessarily lose your ability to trust. You don't feel rejected. You see?
mm.
So that type of healing needed its own name, which is now, I coined a new term, post-betrayal transformation. That's the complete and total rebuild of your life and yourself after an experience with betrayal. That was the first discovery.
Okay, talk to me about the people who didn't heal.
Mhm. Plenty of them. Most, I find, most people, and this is why, and when I share the other discoveries, you'll see they land in a certain stage.
Okay.
And without intentionally and deliberately moving through the stages, this is where most people stop in their healing. I see it all the time. And when I go through the third discovery, you'll see exactly what stage it is and why they're there.
Wow. So tell me about the stages
Mhm.
and tell me about why people stay stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's the well, that was for me. Let me start with the second discovery,
Okay.
because that's going to lead into the third discovery. The second discovery was that there's actually a collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional,
Mm,
so common to betrayal. It's now known as post-betrayal syndrome.
okay.
And we've had easily 60, 70,000 people take our post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent they're struggling. A few things about that. The first thing is, we've all been taught time heals all wounds. I have
Mm,
the proof when it comes to betrayal that's not true.
okay.
There is a question on the quiz that says, is there anything else you'd like to share? And people write things like, my betrayal happened 35 years ago, I'm unwilling to trust. My betrayal happened 40 years ago, I can still feel the hate. My
Yeah.
betrayal happened 10 years ago, feels like it happened yesterday. So
Mm,
we know when it comes to betrayal, you cannot count on time. You can't count on a new relationship to heal it either. And I'm happy to share the statistics from, if you want to hear
yeah.
them.
Yeah. Let's hear them.
Sure.
I'm
Okay, we'll do that and then we'll get into the 5 stages. So
in.
now imagine men, women, every age group is represented, just about every country. So out of all of those people, 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 80% are hypervigilant. That's exhausting.
Mm,
94% deal with painful triggers, and those triggers can take you right down. These are the most common physical symptoms. 71% have low energy, 68% have sleep issues, 63% have extreme fatigue. So you could sleep all night, you wake up, you're exhausted. That's how you know your adrenals have tanked.
mm,
47% have weight changes. So in the beginning, maybe you can't hold food down. Later on, you're using food for comfort. 45% have a digestive issue, and that's anything from Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, constipation, diarrhea, you name it. The most common mental symptoms, 78% are overwhelmed, 70% are walking around in a state of disbelief, 68% are unable to focus, 64% are in shock, 62% can't concentrate. So now imagine you can't concentrate, you have a gut issue, you're exhausted, you still have to work, you still have to raise your kids. That's not even the emotional ones. Emotionally, 88% experience extreme sadness. 83% are really angry. Real common to bounce back and forth between those two emotions. 82% feel hurt. 80% have anxiety. 79% are stressed. Just a few more. Here's why I wrote the book Trust Again. 84% have an inability to trust. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again.
mm,
82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
mm.
Those are staggering, aren't they?
They are very staggering. And it also, there's a couple of things that come to my mind. It sounds a lot like depression, anxiety, PTSD, but it also reminds me a lot of the ACEs study.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very, very, very common
Yeah.
that there are a few, they have ticked off a few numbers there on the ACEs study with some of these
Hmm.
statistics for sure. Now, here's what's even more staggering about it. First of all, you didn't hear me say one stat that was 20%, 30%. These numbers are high.
They're
What's
very,
even crazier to me is these statistics aren't necessarily from a recent betrayal. This could be, excuse me, from something that happened decades ago. So now imagine the parent who did something awful, the girlfriend or boyfriend in high school who dumped you, whatever it was. That person may not know, care, or even remember. And here we are, decades later, walking around in a state of hypervigilance, walking around with the gut issue, with the sleep issues, with the weight challenges, all of that, because of something back then. That's the biggest crime to me.
okay. You mentioned time doesn't heal all wounds.
Mm,
So,
no,
in your opinion, what does?
moving through the 5 stages.
Okay. Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
Okay, this was the third discovery. And when this showed up, I mean, in the geekiest way, I thought my head was going to fly right off my body. And what we learned was while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many people do, if we're going to fully heal, and by fully heal, I mean those symptoms I just read of post-betrayal syndrome to that whole healed, rebuilt place of post-betrayal transformation, we're going to move through 5 now proven predictable stages. And what's even more exciting about that is we know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at each stage. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. Healing is entirely predictable. And I'm happy to share the stages if you want.
I would like that, but I have a question for you before we get into that.
Mhm.
And maybe you can maybe answer this in explaining the 5 stages. But as you're talking, I think betrayal is not a linear thing. Like you mentioned at the very beginning, you had a family betrayal, and then you had one by your husband. And so I think that's very common in people. So my question to you is, even as you're moving through the stages of healing, can you then be triggered by something else which can then send you spiraling back?
Yeah. Here's the thing. A repeat betrayal is a clear sign of an unhealed betrayal.
Yes.
So what happens is the faces change, but it's the same thing. And we go from partner to partner to partner, friend to friend to friend, boss to boss to boss. We say, what the heck, is it me? Yes, it is. Not in that it's your fault, in that it's your opportunity. There is a profound lesson needing to be learned. Until and unless you do, you're going to have opportunities in the form of people to teach you. Like in my experience, here it was my family. A couple of years later, it was my husband. And I was finally like, you know what? That's it. I realized uh, I never did anything for myself. It was all about everybody else. So for me, the most dramatic move I could do was enroll in a PhD program. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know how I was going to manage the time. It was so uncharacteristic for me. But because of that, it changed the entire course of my life. So lesson learned, you see. But so these opportunities show up until we do something drastic, until we get it. And just to close the loop on my story, rebuilding is always a choice, whether we rebuild ourselves and move on. And that's what I did with my family. It simply wasn't an option to rebuild with them. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild something entirely from the ground up new with the person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband. So not long ago, was to totally transform people. We married each other again, new rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids as our bridal party. You know, first of all, never in a gazillion years would I have done that if I wasn't totally different. And for sure, if he wasn't totally different. You know, betrayal will show you who someone truly is. It can also wake them up to who they temporarily became.
You know, and this is something that I haven't heard you say, but I think also probably leads to a deepening of the betrayal too, is having an audience. When you have people that kind of see the betrayal too, like you have other family members that may see it, or you have friends or other people that see it happening, and they may either say nothing or they may sort of throw salt on the wound by saying, you're dumb for sticking around,
Yeah.
or you know, these other things. So I also wonder about the impact of the added stimulation of the people around you, or the environment, if you will.
Yeah. You know, with my family betrayal, I shared that with my friends and they gave me tremendous support and it was wonderful. With my husband, it was so deeply humiliating and embarrassing. And they loved him. So I struggled and suffered in silence. And it really it affected me, physically in the worst kind of way. And the study even proved that we need support desperately, but the wrong type of support does more harm than good. We have a lot of people coming into the PBT Institute with therapy trauma. If that therapist isn't highly skilled in betrayal, it does more harm than good. Because, and as I share the 5 stages, if anything is going to lock someone to stage 3 like cement, it's going over it and over it and over it without coming out of it any differently than when you went in, and without any plan to move forward. So we see that all the time. But also, as far as support, you're absolutely right. Everyone's coming through their own lens. So some people may not know what to say. They just want you out of pain and they're like, come on, get over it already, or whatever their intentions are. And so support is crucial, but the right type. That's why within the PBT Institute, it's very deliberate, where our community, everybody's been through it. We're all in a club we never wanted to be in. However, we're all there to lift and inspire, because even let's take a support group. It's more like the Ain't It Awful Club, where someone's like, oh, this happened to me. And they're like, oh, you think that's bad? This happened to me. And here's what happens. You almost sabotage yourself, because if you heal, you don't belong.
Yeah.
So the right type of support means everything, everything. I hope that answered your question.
It definitely answers the question. And I think, the whole point of bringing that up is like, I just think that piece there could also be a contributing factor in setting people back or keeping people stuck, particularly, like you said, if people really love that person, and they may victim blame,
Mhm.
They may, if you're from a particular society, and you may be surrounded by like misogynistic people or people with some sort of isms,
Mhm. Mhm.
those kind of things keep you in that place too. And it would be interesting to kind of expand and see how much cultural nuances play a contributing factor to that.
They definitely do. And just to before I share the five stages,
Yeah.
I'll get back to the three groups that didn't heal, because it does play a role. Well, the first group, this was the group that was numbing, avoiding, distracting. They
Mm,
just couldn't handle. They would run to the doctor who put them on a mood stabilizer, an
mm,
anti-anxiety medication. They would emotionally eat, whatever it was. It may have made the day a bit easier to get through, not without a price. They didn't heal. The second group was the group that they had their story, they were sticking with it. That was it. They were stuck in that victim mode and so rooted to their story they could not see life any other way. The third group, and this is relates to what you were just talking about, this was the group where the betrayer had very little consequences. So whether it was out of financial fear, not wanting to break up a family, religious reasons, that was a big one. They did all they could to turn the other cheek, to look the other way. I saw two things with this group. Number one, a further deterioration of the relationship. And
mm.
two, this group was the most physically ill.
Interesting.
Your body, your broken heart can't handle that. But we just think, okay, well, let me just keep patching it up, patching it up, patching it up because it's easier. No, betrayal creates a death and destruction of the old, but that's the only way you allow for the birth of the new.
Mm. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that happening. And the other thing that comes to mind as you're talking, in terms of working a lot with people who've had sexual assault, and they talk a lot about how the recovery of sexual assault victims, um, and how they're much more likely to recover and have a much better adjustment in their life if it's done by someone that they don't know
Mhm.
versus someone that they're constantly around and that they've sort of built that around. Just like emotionally, it's much more difficult to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why that support is crucial, because this is too hard to do alone. It
Yeah.
just,
Tell me about those stages. I'm ready. I'm all ears for you.
oh, great. Okay. So it's all we do within the PBT Institute. It's what all of our coaches and practitioners are certified in. They're all mapped out in Trust again, but here's sort of a distilled version. So if you can imagine stage one, if you can imagine four legs of a table, the four legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual.
Mm,
What I saw with everyone, me included, was this real heavy lean on the physical and the mental thinking and doing, and kind of neglecting or ignoring the physical, I'm sorry, the emotional and the spiritual feeling and being. So a table with only two legs, easy for that table to topple over. That's us. Stage two, shock, trauma, D-Day, discovery day, the scariest of all of the stages. And this is the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. Right here, you've ignited the stress response. You're headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease.
mm,
Your mind is in a complete and total state of chaos and overwhelm. You cannot wrap your mind around what you just learned. This makes no sense. And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview is your mental model, the rules that govern us, that prevent chaos. Don't go here, trust this person. This is how life works. And in one earth shattering moment or series of moments, every rule you've ever held to be real and true is no longer. The bottom has truly bottomed out on you, and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. So this is terrifying. But
wow.
think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You grab hold of anything and everything you could to stay safe and stay
Yes.
alive. And
Yes.
that's stage three. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this experience? Where do I go? Who can I trust? How do I feed my kids? Here's the trap though. Stage three, by far hands down, is the most common place we get stuck.
Mm,
And here's why. Once we've figured out how to survive our experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where we just came from. We're like, okay, we got this. We think it's good. And because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we don't know there's a stage 4, stage 5, transformation doesn't even begin until stage 4. But because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we start planting roots here. We're not supposed to, but we don't know that. And 4 things happen. The first thing is you start getting all those small self benefits. You get to be right. You get a target for your anger. You get someone to blame. You get your story. You get sympathy from everyone you tell your story to. You don't have to do the hard work of learning to trust again. Should I trust you? Can I trust you? I forget it. I'm not trusting anybody. So you plant deeper roots. You're not supposed to, but we don't know that. And now that you're here longer than you're supposed to be, now the mind starts doing things like, well, maybe you're not all that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that. So we plant deeper roots. Again, we're not supposed to be here, but we don't know that. Now, because these are the thoughts we're thinking, well, this is the energy we're putting out. And like energy attracts like energy. So now we're calling situations and circumstances and relationships towards us to confirm, yep, this is where you belong. The misery loves company crowd, this is where they come around, right? It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but we don't know there's anywhere else to go. Right here, we resign ourselves. We're like, this stinks, but listen, I have to get through my day. So here's where we start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, whatever it is, keeping busy, anything to numb, avoid, and distract ourselves from what's so painful to feel or face. So think about this. We do it for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I can see someone 20 years out and say, that emotional eating you're doing, or that drinking you're doing, that numbing in front of the TV, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they would look at me like I'm crazy. And they'd say, it happened 20 years ago. All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you in terms of, all of that, which you said misery does. Misery does love miserable company. And people do tend to use these coping strategies that they feel like are helping, but they are just staying stuck. And there's something that is uncomfortable with folks about doing the work.
Well, we don't like getting messy. That's really what it is. And healing from betrayal is messy and uncomfortable. And I found so many people were getting stuck in stage 3. So from hardened to healed is just for stage 3. I'm like, you bothered going through your trauma. You owe it to yourself to move all the way through. But and here's the challenge. The longer we stay in stage 3, the harder it is to leave because we can't imagine life any other way.
What does it mean to be hardened? What does a hardened person look like? Other than some of the coping strategies that you mentioned, what is a true, like if somebody's listening to this and they're not sure if they're hardened or not,
Yeah.
what would they see about themselves?
Yeah, that's a person who's been stuck in stage 3 for so long. That's a person who's like, everything's fine. It's fine. It's when every level, every area of life, your health, your work, your relationships, all of it is fine. You're existing, but that's about it. There's no joy. There's no abundance. There's no, it's like if you imagine this meter from 0 to 100 of wellness and exuberance and joy, they're like, they're striving for 50%. Well, if I have a work to go to, that's okay. If my kids aren't in trouble, it's okay. If my partner comes home at the end of the day, it's okay. If I can button my pants, it's okay. It's like, what the heck is that? That's 50%. That's fine. No, that's your starting point, you see. So those deeply rooted in stage 3, and you could be in there also, and I want to make sure I get you out of stage 3, but you could also be in there just from beliefs that were formed, the meaning you made of something that wasn't necessarily traumatic. Like, for example, and I always use this example, let's say you're a little kid, you're 7 years old, you have some earth-shattering news to share with your mom. She's in the kitchen making a phone call. You race in and she's on the phone. Shh, she shushes you. You could have interpreted that right there at that very moment to mean I don't matter. I'm not important. So think about it. You fuel that a little bit. Your mind always wants to prove you're right. And then now, before you know it, it's building up steam.
Yes.
And so now, you have this underlying belief of I don't matter. And then all your relationships, what you do, what you don't do, confirms that. So that just happened from that shushing. And then so someone would be stuck, they'd become hardened, because if you're living a life like I don't matter, well, all your experiences and your exact world you're living in right now proves that.
I agree. I do think that there's something about people who just sort of create these narratives to confirm these overarching themes in their lives that have
Yeah.
these negative typologies. But the other question I wanted to ask you before we move out of stage 3 is, are people fine, or is that just a lie that we tell ourselves?
Yeah, I think it's what we convince ourselves of so that we don't have to do the work.
Mm.
That's really it. And I have this saying, and I've been using it my 30 years in business. It doesn't matter what the topic, it fits. Ready? And for everybody listening, you may want to write this down. That's my way of saying write this down. And it's easy now, hard later. Hard
Mm,
now, easy later. Take your pick. It's going to be one of those two.
mm,
Most people want and opt for the easy now. Easy now, easy now, easy now. Well, it only leaves the hard later. Like, for example, uh, you know, I need to have that difficult conversation with my partner, but I'm not going to do it. Hard later. The relationship is deteriorating. There's no common ground. Versus hard later, hard now. We need to have that conversation. I'm going to brace myself. I'm going to buckle up, and here we go. Easy later. The
mm.
lines of communication are open. You see. So when it comes to betrayal, the way and we have a saying within the PBT Institute: face it, feel it, heal it. It is all about hard now, because it's grueling work, so that you can have the easy later, that new version of you, that new collective you and your partner, or a new partner, whatever it is. You can't get there without that hard now. Think of the butterfly, right? The caterpillar and the butterfly, the typical symbol of transformation. Caterpillar doesn't just stick a pair of wings on, when on some random day, that caterpillar is done, is just done being a caterpillar. Think about what happens. It hangs from a branch in order to die to the life it's known. It's willing to be deconstructed, emulsified, unrecognizable from anything it once was. Only because it went through that messy process does it get to be the butterfly, one of the most magnificent creatures on our planet. And just like us, we can't get to stage 5 if we are unwilling to get messy and uncomfortable.
Mm, hmm. Okay, tell me about stages 4 and 5.
So if you are willing, and willingness is a huge word right here, willing to let go of the small self benefits, grieve, mourn the loss, bunch of things you need to do, you move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. So here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo what happened, but I control what I do with it. Right there in that decision, you're turning down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but at least you stop the massive damage you've been creating in stages 2 and stage 3. Stage 4 feels like, if you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, all your stuff isn't there. It's not quite cozy yet, but it's like, okay, here we go. It's like a new start. That's what stage 4 feels like. But here's what's interesting. If you were to move, you don't necessarily take everything with you. You don't take the things that don't represent who you want to be in your new space. And what I found was, if your friends weren't there for you, you don't take them with you. Right here, from stage 3 to stage 4, you've outgrown them. And I have people all the time saying to me, what the heck? I've had these friends 10, 20, 30 years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. If they don't rise, they don't come. Very common in this stage. Anyway, when we make a stage 4 cozy, we make it mentally home, we move into the 5th, the most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise. We didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now we do. Where our mind is healing. We're making new rules. We're making new boundaries based on the road we just traveled. And we have a new worldview based on everything we see so clearly now. And the 4 legs of the table, in the beginning, it was all about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
I like that. I want to go back now that you talked about the 5 stages.
Mm-hmm.
which it sounds like you've gone through those yourself.
Mhm.
So, assuming that we progress through all of the 5 stages and we do all the work, do we truly heal from the betrayal? And what I
100%.
mean by that, like, is it is it still something that's at the back of your mind? Is it something that you've completely released all the emotions about it, and that kind of stuff? So tell me about what that
Yeah.
piece, that just like around the betrayal looks like.
Sure. Well, first of all, I didn't do anything anybody else couldn't do. But frankly, there was no roadmap when I was doing it. And now there's a roadmap. So I wish I had a roadmap for this when I was going through mine. That's really it. You're a version of yourself that never would have had the opportunity to exist had that not happened. And it's like this. It's like, I love giving analogies. Here's one. It's like Legos. Everybody knows Legos. Let's say there's a Lego structure and it's not great. It's just built. And there it is. It's just there for a long time. And then all of a sudden, it's just shattered in all those. You're looking at all those Lego pieces. Well, here's the thing. When you're moving through stage 4 and 5, it's as if you are deliberately and intentionally choosing only the pieces that you want to build something magnificent. And that's what it is. Your betrayal really lends itself to creating an entirely new identity. You take the parts you love, you leave behind everything that no longer serves, and you become a version of yourself that's totally, totally different because of that experience. Now, will you still have triggers? Yes, but they don't have the same emotional charge they did.
Yeah.
You're just different. You're so much stronger, healthier, confident, all of it. I mean, that's our coaches are living that. I'm living it. Our members who graduate, that's what they become. That's it. You're cleaning it all up at the roots and becoming just someone just so powerful.
Yeah, and I think that's important for people to know that, it's like a scar that was
Mhm.
there. It's always going to be there. Sure, it can fade and it can look better on some days
Mhm.
more than others, but it's always going to be there.
Mhm.
And I like that. I think people, one of the things that I see in people, especially when they're trying to heal from betrayals in a relationship, is that they try to rush the process
Mhm.
and they think that, oh, I just want to get done with this. I want this to be over. Any suggestions you have about that in terms of realistically what
Yeah.
people are looking at in terms of their healing?
Yeah. So, and it was interesting because I assumed, you're not supposed to assume anything as a researcher. I was new at this, what I know, but I assumed that the people who were the hardest hit would grow the least because they had the most to overcome. That had nothing to do with it at all. It was the biggest factor in healing. If I had to say what's one word, it's willingness. Because someone can be so resistant and hang on to their story for dear life. You could have all the tools and resources available. It doesn't matter. You're not going anywhere. So time has so much less to do with it
Mm,
than willingness.
wow. Okay. And I definitely want to circle back to what you were saying about the friendship piece,
Mhm.
because there's been a lot of women out there that say, my betrayal from my good girlfriend of 10, 20 years hit harder to me than the breakup, hit harder for me than the breakup with my last
Mhm.
lover. But
Mhm.
you're saying that friendships are not as dire or not as impactful.
Well, they absolutely will infuriate you. They will shake you up and rattle you 100%. When I'm speaking of like the family betrayals, and I don't know the extent of the relationship when
Sure,
you
sure,
compare
sure,
it
sure.
to a breakup. I'm comparing it to that love of your life, who you trusted 100%. There was a deep connection. You thought this person never in a bazillion years would ever betray you. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I can't, it's hard for me to compare. I don't know the
Sure.
situation, someone's like that, but absolutely, those friendship betrayals, they're shocking. I mean, you thought your friend had your back. That was the rule. That was the deal. And then again, without your awareness or consent, they broke that spoken or unspoken rule. So is there a lot to clean up? Sure, there is. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. There's one thing to heal from a betrayal.
Mhm.
And then there's another thing to still be in a relationship with someone who caused it.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that aspect of the healing?
Sure. Well, if it's not addressed or not dealt with, it's not healed. So I don't know what kind of relationship you're going to have. It's going to be one that's, how connected can you be? How, what kind of relationship is that? Now, if that person is remaining in your life, are you best off understanding, well, this is the extent to which they're capable right now. And at this current level of consciousness, they're doing the best they can. Sure. And then adjust your expectations around the relationship, very
Okay.
different. Depends what you expect from it.
I agree. And how do you know whether or not it's worth salvaging or whether it's worth you sort of salvaging? Because I would imagine as you do the work, that's
Mhm.
one side of the equation.
Mhm.
You're doing the work.
Yeah.
That other person has to also do a fair share of the work or should be doing a fair share of the work
Yeah.
too,
You
if
know,
not more.
Sure. The way we do it within the PBT Institute, it is all about the person who's been betrayed. We get someone to their physical, mental, and emotional best because it's from that place that things become very clear and they make their best decisions. What happens is if it's contingent on someone else doing the work as well, I see so often the betrayed person will sabotage their success because they don't want to outgrow their partner. So it's a tricky thing. In my case, that was the deal breaker. So I was like, all right, well, here I go. I'm healing. And I had no idea what his intention was. That wasn't my concern. So it really depends. But I do see people will sabotage their success because they do not want to outgrow their partner. So they have more of the same. And that's the best you can expect.
Yeah. Awesome. That's a heavy thought to hear that you would sabotage all the work that you're doing
Mhm.
just to stay with someone. And what is the reason you think that people do that?
Fear, fear. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you've left us with a lot of gems, and I hate to leave people hanging, but we're at the end. So, Dr. Debbie, can you tell us how we can find you if people want to reach out to you, what sort of wonderful things you might be working on, how we can support
Mhm.
you?
Everything can be found at the PBT is in post betrayal transformation, the PBTinstitute.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And it's been so wonderful talking to you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, would love to know your thoughts on the interview, the chat that I had with Debbie. Love to hear about your betrayal trauma, sort of your resilience and how you were able to overcome that if what Debbie had to share really resonated with you. A lot of times, again, I work a lot with people that have been in relationships with narcissists, either intimate partner relationships or family of origin relationships. And there is a lot of betrayal that occurs in those relationships that, people, they just don't know the depth of that betrayal can become sometimes. So, would love to know if this episode helped you and brought new clarity and insight to you on your healing journey. And you guys, until next time, you take care of yourselves, stay out of trouble, and be well. Check out the sneak preview of next week's episode.
That's a good question. That is a very good question. I noticed that one of the biggest things that I noticed about the relationship is that I had zero energy. I
Mm.
mean, when I tell you I was pretty much lethargic sun up to sundown. And it was to a place I felt like I was literally like life was passing me by.
Mm,
Like I was not in a space where I was actually living life. I was existing.
mm,
And in that place of existence, I wasn't even allowed to be who I truly am. Because anytime, what people need to know about narcissists is narcissists need you to be the way that they want you to be.